In this video, what I want to do is explain what the Zephyr yield share is and go into details about how it works. In summary, it's a new yield engine fueled by proof of work. And so what I mean by that is it's new. No other blockchain has ever done this before. It's a yield engine, so it is producing yield all of the time, and it is fueled by proof of work block emissions, meaning that the actual yield, the stablecoin payment, comes from proof of work. If you're not familiar, it's zephyrprotocol.com. This is a private ecosystem. All of these coins are natively private. They are Monero privacy level coins. You have Zeph, which is the native coin. It's very similar to XMR. You have a stable coin. You have a reserve coin, which collateralizes the stable coin. And then you have a yield share, which is what we're going to talk about today. The Zephyr yield share is a pool or a yield reserve that pays you to stake your stablecoin, and it pays that yield in stablecoin. So you can see here that there is a pool of ZSD, and there is a number of yield shares minted. These are minted by actually sending ZSD into the pool. So you can see here, there are different people who have sent ZSD into the pool. They're staking their ZSD, and in return for staking that ZSD, they get a ZYS share. So ZYS is created or minted when you stake ZSD in the ZYS pool. Stake ZSD, get ZYS. So you do this in the wallet. It's basically like you're swapping ZSD for ZYS, and in swapping, you're essentially staking ZSD. And when you want to swap back, then you go ahead and do that, and you'll get your ZSD back, but you'll actually get more ZSD than when you started. This is really the same thing as lending USDC on Aave. A USDC is created when you lend USDC in the USDC pool. So if I lend USDC, right, if I supply it, I will get 4% APY. And when I go ahead and stake that USDC in the lending pool, in return, I will receive a USDC, which stands for Aave. And it's basically a coin that represents my share of the pool. It's the same exact thing here with Zephyr. If I go ahead and stake my stablecoin, I will get a coin in return, which represents my share of the yield. So it says ZYS is a coin that represents your share of the yield, which comes from block emissions. So as I've said in previous videos, every 2 minutes when a block is mined, 5% of the Zeph that's inside of that block will be auto-converted into ZSD and then paid to the people who own ZYS. As you can see here, different people have a different share of the ZYS reserve, and that really just depends on how much ZSD they've added, because the ZSD that they add will mint them ZYS, which is a coin that represents your share of the pool. And if Zeph goes higher, then the amount of ZSD minted every 2 minutes goes up. And then that payment is paid out to all of these people proportionate to the amount of share they have in the pool. And this is exactly the same, or it's very similar to how lending USDC works. If there's less people in the USDC pool, then you'll get a higher APY. If there's more people who are willing to borrow and pay a fee, then you will get a higher APY. So this is also a variable APY, just like Zeph ZYS is a variable APY, and we'll talk about why that is in just a minute. But what you want to know here is that AUSDC is a coin that represents your share of the lending interest. So when I stake USDC, it's like saying when other people borrow from this pool and they pay a fee, I'll get a small percentage of that fee. and my percentage will be calculated as an APY, and it's variable, so it changes all the time, meaning if less people or more people stake, or more people want to borrow or less want to borrow, that will modify the amount of fees accruing and being split amongst the individuals. And AUSDC is a coin that represents how much share I will end up getting, and it's really quite the same as how ZYS works. It's a share that represents the amount of yield that I'll end up getting. Furthermore, ZYS has consistently had some of the highest yielding returns for stablecoin. The first 12 months returned 68% APY. What's even more impressive about this is that the Zephyr price fell over 90% during that time period. So when the ZYS coin was first launched in October of 2024, the price of Zephyr was $5. And then over the next 12 months, the price of Zephyr went down to 50 cents. This is actually really important because if you remember, the APY comes from the price of Zephyr. The fact that it went down so much over this period of time, and yet the APY was still 68%, really should make you wonder how that's even possible. This is extremely impressive that the price of the underlying yield mechanism, the proof of work block emissions, that is taking Zephyr and turning it into ZSD, the price of Zephyr going down this much, and yet the APY is still as much as it is, makes you realize that if the price of Zephyr starts going higher, then the APY is going to go a lot higher. And if that doesn't make sense to you, just kind of stick with this. It will make sense as we move through this. Remember, the APY comes from 5% of the Zephyr, mined from every 2-minute block reward. So the price of Zephyr every 2 minutes dictates how much ZSD is minted and added to the ZYS pool. The higher the Zephyr price, the more ZSD is minted and given to ZYS holders. If Zephyr jumps to $100 right now, with approximately 7 Zephyr per block, that would be $700 worth of value being created every 2 minutes. So every 2 minutes there's a block. That block has 7 Zephyr. If Zephyr is $100, then it will be $700 worth of value. And the way that the protocol works is that 5% of that value will be automatically converted into ZSD, and that $35 will be paid to ZYS holders. That's $35 every 2 minutes, or $25,200 per day paid to ZYS holders. That's where the yield comes from. If the price of Zephyr is going down, then the money that is split amongst the ZYS holders is smaller. If the price of Zephyr goes higher, then the money that is paid out to the ZYS holders is larger. So the fact that you can get 68%, even though the price went down 90% over this period, should make you scratch your head and wonder, how is this possible? And you should be thinking, what might happen if the price of Zephyr goes higher? ZYS has never gone down in price, even with the price of Zephyr falling over 90% since its launch date in October of 2024. ZYS by design can't go down in price because it's a pool of stablecoins earning stablecoin yield from proof of work block emissions. For this reason, ZYS is like a train that never stops. It can only go faster or slower, depending on the price of Zephyr and the demand for ZYS. So you can see here, this purple line moving from the left to the right, this is the price of ZYS over time, and it's gone from $1 to $1.75, and that's been about 13 months since its launch, so it's up 75% since that period, and it can never go down. I've talked about this in a previous video. This chart is also from a previous video. This nicely highlights that whatever the price of Zephyr is will dictate what the price of ZYS is in the future. So 100 days from when this chart was made, the price of ZYS will be approximately $5 if the price of Zephyr is $15 over that period of 100 days on average, right? So if the price of Zephyr stays $15, for 100 days, then the block reward, which is minting ZSD, will have a certain amount of value that will get paid out to ZYS holders, and that will get added to the pool. And you can do a simple calculation to determine exactly where the price of ZYS will be in the future. And something you can see here is that these lines only go up. They don't go down. The native ZYS token can never go down in price. That's just how it works. It's a pool of stablecoins that gets yield paid in stablecoins. There is a calculator on the Zephyr protocol website where you can look back historically 365 days, and you can see, well, what would happen if I had invested $1,000, and you would have got 65% over that period of time. And you can also project into the future 365 days. And if you invest $1,000 today, your low projection is 5%, and your high projection is 43%, and the base is 28%. And this is calculated based on the current competition for ZYS, which is the number of people who hold ZYS, and the price of Zeph, or the capacity for ZSD to be minted, which is also based on the price of Zeph. But basically, this is a pretty good estimate of exactly how much stablecoin yield you will get over the next 365 days. And I believe this to be quite accurate. In my opinion, it's actually going to be higher because Zeph is going to go higher. Stablecoin or stablecoin-like pools paying yield in stablecoin is not a new phenomenon. All these instruments in this chart trend higher in price over time. So it's not like Zeph is the first blockchain protocol to ever invent this process. And what I have here is a chart that is highlighting some of the main coins that have the same mechanism. So you have Yearn Vault DAI, which was launched in January 2023, as far as I can tell. These are all estimates, by the way. I did my best to get all of this information and put it into a chart. It might be inaccurate. I don't really know all the details. I tried to do my best to get that information. So, you might want to do your own research on this chart for sure. But this really just highlights the main point that I want to make, which is that ZYS is not the first, but it is the best. So the APY to date is 75%. It's actually more now. And these other ones, 15, 17, 20% for savings DAI. You have OUSG, which we'll talk about in a minute. You have USDY. These two are actually not stable coins. They're like T-bills. And we'll talk about that. So you can see the source of yield comes from different places, but none of them come from proof of work block emissions except for ZYS. It's the first of its kind, and it has the best yield. And you can see there are a variety of places you can actually get yield from. Other here represents maybe a half a dozen or more other techniques where you can grow the yield. And fees and stuff like that also help to grow the yield. But when ZYS is wrapped on Ethereum, so that it's a WZYS, then it will also have access to some of these other techniques like lending and interest and so on. It won't have access to T-bills, but it will have access to some of these other techniques, and this will actually grow even more as a result of those. But the main point that I'm making here is that the source of yield is different and it's superior. So here, again, is a deep dive into the coins that we were just looking at on the chart above. So it's in the same order. You have Yearn, Vault, DAI, right? And you can go to CoinGecko and check this out. You see it only trends up. Now, sometimes it can have these down spikes, and that's because on the market, you can actually buy and sell these, and so they can kind of trend around. But at the native level, they only trend up in value. So here you have OUSG. We'll talk about that in a second. You have savings DAI, that one also trending up, of course, over time. You have USDY, which is a T-bill mechanism, and this one will trend up over time, but it's somewhat volatile, so it actually can go up and then come back down, and that is because of how these mechanisms are bought and sold on the market, but they will grow over time. Then you have this high yield USD, which is HYUSD, and you can see again that trends up over time. Here's ZYS also trending up over time, but one thing you'll note is in the 1 year that it trended up, it went up significantly higher than any of these others. 6%, right? 4.5 over the last year, 7%, 3.5%, 4%, 4%, right? So all of these are doing the same thing. They're basically like stablecoin or similar stablecoin-like protocols that grow over time because the yield or the payment is paid in stablecoin. So it can only go up. That's just how these things work. One thing you'll notice is ZYS is not actually on CoinGecko, and that's because there's no centralized exchange or decentralized exchange that ZYS is on, so CoinGecko can't pull that data in. But when ZYS is wrapped on Ethereum, it will be on a decentralized exchange, like on Uniswap, and then it will be pulled over into DeFi Llama and into CoinGecko, and people will see it. They'll see that it has a really good APY, and they'll want to buy it. And so really, it's just under the radar right now. That's all it really is. You have SUSDS, which is from Sky.money, which is like MakerDAO's rebrand, and it's very similar to Savings DAI, but I actually just learned that the interest is actually paid out slightly different than Savings DAI. It's paid out with a kind of delta neutral technique with perp future funding fees. It's pretty complicated, but it's approximately the same current APY. So it's not like it's much superior. And probably it's actually more risky, I would say, because of the way that they're trying to get the yield. But you can see it's number 40 right now, which is actually really impressive. And then you have this institutional grade cash management, USDY, which we just talked about, and OUSG. This is a US dollar yield, and this one is a short-term US Treasury fund. And this is like institutional grade, very, very safe. They're backed by T-bills, and you can see them here and here. And they're not stable coins, but they're T-bills. They're pretty much the same thing. They're very similar. They're like on-chain treasury bills, as far as I understand it. And I guess this one might be a little different. I haven't done too much research on it. But the point I'm trying to make here is that ZYS is not new. It's not some type of new invention that Zeph came up with. It's simply a better version of what already exists. And the reason it is better is because its source of yield is different. ZSD has never depegged, even with the collateral backing ZSD called Zeph going down 98% from its all-time high of $52 down to approximately 50 cents. So Zeph is what collateralizes ZSD. It's the proof of reserve. It's what gives value to ZSD. And if the price of Zeph goes down, then the peg could depeg. But because of the way that the protocol works, which is a JED protocol, it is extremely stable. And it uses gyroscopic-like techniques to balance the entire protocol so that when the price of Zeph drops, ZRS will become more appealing and you will buy ZRS, which collateralizes ZSD, and then that balances everything else out, while the people who have ZSD can simply unmint and leave to safety. So the whole system works very well. You couldn't get a more useful example of how stable this stablecoin is. It didn't depeg over a 98% drawdown. It's not going to depeg. Selling Zeph for ZSD in the wallet has no sell pressure on Zeph. So if I want to sell $50,000 worth of Zeph, I can do that in the wallet and pay a $50 fee, and it will cost me 48,000 Zeph to do so. I took this screenshot when the price of Zeph was $1.02, and this is what that comes out to. It cost me 50 bucks, and it will not impact the price of Zeph whatsoever. If I want to sell $50,000 worth of Zeph on a centralized exchange, then what that would end up doing is pushing the price of Zeph lower, so it has sell pressure on the price of Zeph. And not only that, but my average price would be about 74 cents. I'd have to sell 56,000 Zeph, and I would only get $42,000. In the wallet, I could sell less Zeph, 48,000, and get more money. I would get $50,000 instead of $42,000. So I'm incentivized to swap Zeph with ZSD in the wallet because the liquidity is better and because there's absolutely no sell pressure on Zeph. When I do this, the market doesn't notice. There's no actual pressure because it's just a swapping mechanism. That's how the wallet works. Furthermore, if I sell Zeph for ZSD in the wallet, and then I hold that ZSD, no one is my exit liquidity. So not only is there no sell pressure with someone else holding the bag, and they will eventually want to sell that bag, rather, swapping Zeph to ZSD actually locks that Zeph in the reserve to back the ZSD, which essentially is removing Zeph from the circulating supply, furthering the chances of creating supply shock and price discovery to the upside. With most cryptocurrencies, you have a coin and then you sell that, and you sell it to somebody else in an order book, right? And so that individual then owns that coin. And so at some point, they're going to want to sell that coin. Maybe they sell it a day later or a week later because they're fearful. Maybe they actually diamond hand and hold it for a long time. In either case, they eventually want to sell that. With ZSD, you can actually get value for your coin, and instead of selling it to someone, you put it into a reserve. So when I swap my Zeph to ZSD, I will get ZSD in return, and that Zeph will get locked away in a reserve. You can see there's 2.9 million Zeph in the reserve. Currently, there's actually over 3 million Zeph in the reserve, and that's because people are actually adding Zeph into the reserve to get either stable dollars or reserve coins. As a result, this is going higher, and it's getting locked away from the circulating supply. Now, it's not locked forever. I can pull this out whenever I want, but it's not in the market for sale. So if I want to lock in my gains, I'm going to have really good liquidity in the wallet. I'm going to end up getting the value that I want, and I'm going to lock away the Zeph such that there will be price discovery to the upside, and there'll be less Zeph on the market. So there will not be sell pressure. If anything, there will be more buy pressure as a result of this mechanism, and ultimately it encourages individuals to use the wallet. One final thing I want to point out is that if I buy $50,000 worth of Zeph in the wallet, then I will pay a $50 fee, and I will get $50,000 worth of Zeph at the current price. However, if I want to buy $50,000 worth of Zeph on a centralized exchange, then I will buy all the way up through the order book, and that will raise the price of Zeph, and my average price will end up being higher than 1.05. So in the wallet, I will have no buy pressure on Zeph, but I'll get more Zeph for my money. And in the centralized exchange, I'll have buy pressure on the exchange, but I will get less Zeph for the amount of money that I have. And so this is actually a good thing because ultimately I'll get more Zeph, and it encourages me to use the wallet. If it's encouraging me to use the wallet, then Zeph is being locked away in the reserve more often. And if it's getting locked in the reserve, then it's not in the circulating supply available for sale on the market. And that will lead to price discovery to the upside. If Zeph is going higher as a result of there being less Zeph for sale because it's getting locked away and held in the reserve or in my wallet, then the ZYS APY will go higher, because if the price of Zeph is higher, then the APY will go higher. And if the APY is going higher, then people who are interested in stablecoin APY will purchase ZYS as a result of that. And in purchasing ZYS, Zeph will go even higher. And so you're beginning to understand why Zeph is extremely undervalued. In order for any of these three coins to exist, there has to be Zeph backing it. That's how it works. Zeph is backing ZRS. If I want ZRS, I need to buy Zeph and mint ZRS. If I want to get ZSD, I have to buy Zeph and swap it for ZSD. If I want to get ZYS, I have to buy Zeph, swap it for ZSD, and then swap ZSD for ZYS. In any case, these three all require Zeph to be locked in the reserve, meaning there will be less for sale, and these are valuable. There's a reason why you would want them. There's a reason why 1.4 million exists, because there's an upside potential. Same with ZYS. It has extremely good potential. ZSD, of course, is a stablecoin. There's a lot of good use cases for that. It's not just a stablecoin, it's also a privacy decentralized stablecoin. Nobody can freeze it. There's good reason to own it. And in any case, if you own any of these, Zeph is locked in the reserve in order to back the existence of these minted coins. So when you understand that these coins all exist because Zeph is locked away somewhere, then you understand that the circulating supply is even smaller, and that can cause big price discovery to the upside. Buying wrap ZYS causes Zeph buy pressure via arbitrage and liquidity management. I've talked about this in a previous video. What you want to know is that if you have USDT on Ethereum and you want to buy wrapped ZYS via MetaMask, then you can go ahead and do that. And in doing so, you will end up adding USDT to the Uniswap pool, and you'll get wrapped ZYS in return. But that will cause an imbalance between these pools, and then arbitrage and liquidity management will be such that USDT will be removed from the pool and used to buy Zeph, and then swapped to ZSD in the native wallet, and then bridged over to Ethereum, and then added back to balance these. And then the same thing here, these will auto balance as well. But the net effect will be such that if I buy wrap ZYS, Zeph will go up in price because of how this arbitrage and liquidity management work. Now, the opposite is also generally true, that if I sell my wrap ZYS and I get USDT in return, then we'll find that this arbitrage and liquidity management system will have a sell pressure on Zeph in order to manage that liquidity. However, what's unique about this is that selling wrapped ZYS can have a net Zeph buy pressure via arbitrage and liquidity management if the centralized to decentralized arbitrage comprises at least 17% of the arbitrage pathway versus decentralized only. So this is actually pretty complicated. I haven't talked very much about this. I'm going to make a whole video about this, one slide right here. So stay tuned for that video. The main thing you want to know is generally, if you sell wrap ZYS, it will have a sell pressure on Zeph. That's just how this works. It works in both directions. If you buy wrap ZYS, it will have a buy pressure on Zeph. The opposite is true. However, what's unique about this is if people are deciding to purchase Zeph from a centralized exchange and moving it over to Ethereum to do the arbitrage, they don't have to. They can go through the DEX system. But if they do it this way, and there's a good reason, because there can be price impact this way where you won't be able to get as much money. If the order books are such that there's a lot of Zeph for sale, you can actually end up buying a lot of Zeph and arbitraging and making a lot more money through this pathway. And if you do that, you can end up having a net buy pressure on Zeph as long as 1/6 of the time it's happening via centralized exchanges moving over to Ethereum. So if at least 1/6 of the time people are doing this pathway, then it will be neutral, essentially. And if it's happening more than 1/6 of the time, then there's a buy pressure on Zeph. So this is actually pretty unique. Like I said, I'm going to make a whole video about this. But what you want to know is there is a potential for Zeph to go up in price via arbitrage and liquidity, regardless of whether or not this is above or below the native price. And whether or not people are buying or selling, it doesn't matter. There can be a net buy pressure if the arbitrage happens through this pathway, which I have highlighted here, and I'm going to make another video about that. Given all the facts that I've laid out so far in this video, my hypothesis is that Zeph is likely the most asymmetric play in all of crypto, with the potential to hit a 50 billion plus market cap, driven by demand for Ethereum wrapped ZYS, which again is a stablecoin staking protocol with APY. It's paid out in stablecoins from block emissions. It's currently 30%. It is variable. It depends on the price of Zeph and the demand for ZYS. My reasoning is that mercenary capital always goes to where it's treated best. Capital naturally flows towards the places where it can earn the highest risk-adjusted return. So the question becomes, is wrapped ZYS low risk enough that the returns make it worthwhile? So if wrapped ZYS risk is perceived to be low, demand for wrapped ZYS could be enormous, which would drive the market cap of Zeph much higher. And of course, if the Zeph market cap is going higher, the block emissions every 2 minutes is higher, the amount of ZSD minted is higher, and then the amount of money paid out to the ZYS holders is higher, so that more people can get in and still get pretty sustainable APY. And so that's basically how ZYS works. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you have any questions, I do recommend that you leave them below. I'm happy to answer them. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, share it with other people, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next video.